Well, hi, everybody. It's Buildup, Lecture 4. Actually, today, as I think many of you know, was supposed to be a day off, but because Aaron and his group are heading to Mexico, I think next week, Aaron, is that right?
Yes.
We will not have a class next week. So it's a week off. You can do all the reading and all the work that you need to do to catch up next week. And then so the next build-up class will be 2 weeks from today. So Thursday, 2 weeks from now, noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time. We're going to hear from me just for a little bit. I was only going to do 5 minutes, but I told Aaron and Brad Cartier, our special guest today, Brad, that I was going to hog about 15 or 20 minutes instead of 5 minutes because I can't resist hearing myself talk. So I apologize to you, Aaron, and to Brad. Brad Cartier is a good friend to Aaron and me. Brad is a partner with Aaron in many different projects, and I've been coaching Brad for a number of years. And I mentioned to you in the emails that he's a tech guy. He runs a wonderful newsletter, weekly real estate newsletter called briefcase.email, which if you haven't subscribed, it's free. It's very good. It's funny, and it's very relevant. So subscribe to briefcase.email. Brad also works for a company based in Texas called Hostfully. So if you're thinking about Airbnb or other short-term rental platforms, reach out to Brad. I mean, he's a developer. He's a dad. He's got 4 kids, right, Aaron?
Yep.
And he's still in his 30s. So it's amazing what he's able to do. So we're going to hear from Brad after Aaron. But anyway, so what I wanted to do is I'm going to share my screen with y'all, and I just want to show you something that came up actually last weekend. So not last weekend, but the weekend before last. I was invited to give a keynote speech for the Canadian Association of Rent-to-Own Professionals. You can see their initials are up here, CAROP. C-A-R-O-P, the Canadian Association of Rent-to-Own Professionals. And I gave a keynote, which won't surprise any of you guys, that focused on what a rent-to-own professional could do to make the house that they're buying on behalf of a tenant buyer work better through animation. So very simple stuff. Like if you were a rent-to-own client, in other words, a tenant buyer, you could buy a house on say a long closing with a rent-to-own professional where some of your monthly payments would go towards your down payment. All right, that's kind of rent-to-own in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it than that. And so I said, look, it could help both a rent-to-own professional, the person who initially buys the house, and the future tenant buyer to have some independent income from having a basement apartment or a micro suite or both, or even a coach house in the backyard. So why not do it sooner rather than later? So that was my keynote in a flash. But then after me, Elizabeth Kelly, who is a real estate coach and is very, very good at it, and she is an expert in rent-to-own, she gave a speech which came up with a new solution or a possible new solution. What do you do if one of your properties, a house, a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex, is underwater financially? And she came up with a really interesting solution. And I thought, Aaron, if you and Brad don't mind, I'm going to talk about it for a few minutes. All right, so not too much longer. I got to keep my eye on things. Yeah, I got just 11 or 12 more minutes. So some time ago, during the pandemic, actually, I went back and I reread a 2012 Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki book, Who Took My Money? Why Slow Investors Lose and Fast Money Wins. And maybe I'm thick or something like that. I had to read it 3 times to see if I really grasped what Robert was getting at. What does he mean when he says fast money beats slow money? And I think I understand it now, but it took me a few goes at it. And really, I'm summarizing here or paraphrasing, okay? What Robert was saying is every year or 2 or 3, you should review your real estate portfolio, okay? And even if it's very small, even if you only own 2 or 3 buildings, if you own 20 or 30, so much the better. But every year or 2 or 3, review your portfolio and see if there's 1 or 2 properties that you own that are really not sort of meeting all the tests. You know, the cap rate isn't maybe what you want it to be. The rate of appreciation is maybe where you want it to be. And maybe it's peaked in value. And what he's saying is, and this is where the fast money comes in, is you should prune your portfolio, even though we're all buy and hold guys for most part, right? We buy properties, we renovate them, we animate them, we fix them up, we refinance them, we hold them, hopefully for very long periods of time. I think he's right that every once in a while you should review your portfolio, get rid of the dogs, sell them, and redeploy that capital into assets that have greater room for animation, greater room for appreciation, greater growth in cash flow. That's all he's saying. But it took me 3 goes to see if I could figure it out. And I call that trading up. You know, trading something that's not performing very well for something that's performing better. Lately, I have been getting, and so has Elizabeth Kelly, I've been getting a lot of calls from the people I coach and my realtor clients. They're saying, we're all in a box. So all of us are in a box. We're having trouble raising our rents fast enough to keep up with inflation. We aren't really able to lower our operating expenses very much. You know, if you called, the gas company and say, hey, listen, I want to pay less, they're probably not going to pay much attention to you or me. We can't really do anything about interest rates. You can always increase the amortization period on your mortgage, which will lower your monthly payments, but it just means you're paying your mortgage for longer. And maybe you can't even sell the house or the triplex or the fourplex because markets have dropped in your area, maybe down as much as 20%, which is not uncommon. So we're all in this box. What the hell do we do? So what I have been recommending is, look, try and hang on for 2 or 3 years. Maybe interest rates will drop in that time, and you'll be able to find ways to increase your revenues. And something else I've been saying, and this is not new, is when you're in trouble, don't sell, buy. And I'll give you an example. One of my clients owns 21 townhouses that are not, the cap rate is not very good, and he can't sell them today because the prices in that area have dropped about 20%. So what he did was he bought, like not very far away, an old industrial building. It was really an old garage, a 15,000 square foot garage, which he turned into a bunch of small workshops. And now he's very focused on renting the townhouses with a workshop not too far away. So he's very focused on the entrepreneur market, and that's how he is raising his overall cap rate between the two properties, which are, as I said, very close to each other. And he bought that old garage. Nobody else wanted it for $45,000. That's $3 a square foot of built-up space. You know, you can't build anything for $3. So that's certainly one possible solution. And then you've heard me talk about animating. I've got one property where I have exactly this kind of condition, and we're adding a coach house in the backyard, which will be on short-term rental. But here's the idea that Elizabeth came up with. So this is a picture I took at the Canadian Association of Rent-to-Own Professionals Summit, April 22nd. So I guess about 10 days ago. And Elizabeth came up with this really clever idea. I had, I wish I could claim it as my own, but I cannot. How to sell a property that is underwater financially, but not taking a bath, i.e. losing money. And so she gave an example, which I find the best way to learn, right? At least for me. I could tell you the theory behind this, but the theory is one thing, and a case study is a little bit easier, at least in my case, to understand it. So this was a homeowner in Toronto. At the height of the pandemic, they bought a property for $800,000 and did $100,000 in renovations to legalize a basement apartment. So their total investment was $900,000. And then this spring, they came to Elizabeth and said, look, the property has dropped $150,000 since we bought it. Interest rates have more than doubled to 6.5%. Our mortgage is going to be almost $3,800 a month. We have to pay property taxes, insurance, and all kinds of other things. We're in real trouble. We can't hold on to the property. We have to sell it, but if we sell it, we're going to lose $200,000. Now, Elizabeth is a very good coach, and she said, well, I'm not here to coach you to buy high and sell low. Maybe your mom and dad told you, buy low and sell high. Well, a coach, if he or she is any good, will tell you that's what you want to do. You certainly don't want to buy high and sell low. All right, so what did she suggest? So what she did was, she is a rent-to-own expert, far more knowledgeable in this field than I am. And she said, look, what we're going to do is I'm going to find a tenant buyer, somebody who has bruised credit, but has decent income, or somebody who has wants to own a house but can't afford it right now, doesn't have a deposit. And she said, I think I can sell it for something that will be close to getting you out whole. And they said, how is that possible? Well, here's what she did was, she sold it to somebody, you'll see on the next slide, for $880,000, so close to the $900,000 that they need. And why would the rent-to-own tenant buyer agree to pay $880 for a building that's only worth $750? It's because they won't close it for 3 years. Now, it represents about a 5.5% increase or something like that over the 3 years to get to where they will be. And in the 3 years, it gives them enough time to either fix their bruised credit score or save up their deposit, or both. And they get a chance to become a homeowner that they might not otherwise have. And also, they're going to benefit from the animation revenues, because the basement apartment is now legal, and they'll be able to get significant revenues from that. So this is the rent-to-own deal that Elizabeth worked out. The couple who bought this place put down $37,500 in as a deposit. Now that's 3 years out, but the deposit comes now. And then they have to pay all of the ongoing costs of maintaining the property, and including paying the mortgage and everything else that's necessary. And then again, as I said, the sale price is guaranteed at $880, 3 years out. All right. So this is a very, very big idea. And I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I'm almost done here. This is a big idea, and I think it can work. Let me just get rid of my slide deck. Sorry about that. I think it can work in many, many different scenarios. So let's say I had a triplex that I own for $900,000, and it's now down to $750,000. I could go to Elizabeth and say, look, can you find somebody who wants to live in one of those units, rent out the other 2 units, and pay the $900,000 3 years out? But they take on all the responsibility of paying for the mortgage and all the rest of that. So they relieve me of those ongoing cash flow issues. Right. So, I mean, it does. And you as the current owner, you get your $900,000 or whatever you've agreed to, $880, whatever it is, you get that sooner rather than later. You don't have to wait the 3 years. I don't know if I made it very clear. Elizabeth would have done a better job. What do you think, Aaron?
I think that's very interesting. And the model exists. There's a couple companies in the US that do it on furniture. I don't know why you couldn't do it on a house. It's really intriguing, actually.
Well, I have a meeting on Friday. I guess that's tomorrow. I have a meeting on Friday with somebody who just finished, or is completing shortly, is completing a $100 million fund to fund $500 million in rent-to-own purchases and sales, right? So it's a pretty big industry, and it's getting bigger. And certainly in this, the next 2 or 3 years, as we go through, sort of a very painful process of double or triple interest rates, we're going to see a lot more of this. So I just thought, if anybody needed that, or if you have any friends or colleagues who need some help in this direction, I can certainly put you in touch with Elizabeth. She is brilliant and certainly the best in the field that I know. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Are there any comments in the chat box? I'm going to check. Hang on a second. See if there's any. Oops, there's anything here. All right. So, yeah, her name is Elizabeth Kelly, and yes, and James, you knew that it's an agreement for sale. I think, Denise, you talked to me about that. Stuart, you're shaking your head. No? Do you want to correct us, please?
Yeah. This is not an agreement for sale. It is just a straight rent-to-own purchase. This has been going on for years, actually. But if people are not in the rent-to-own space, they may not know about it. But this has been something that's been going on for quite a long time. But yeah, the agreement for sale is totally, totally different.
Can you
People
explain
confuse the two, but they're not.
the difference, Denise?
The agreement for sale is when you're buying a property and it is a specific contract of the agreement for sale where you become
The buyer.
when you say you, who are you talking about when you say
The
you?
buyer.
Yeah, so the, now you confuse me because you said something. Lost my train of thought there. But the purchaser basically takes over the property. Everything is yours. You take over everything. It's not an option to buy later. You just pay for it later because it's technically bought. You just haven't changed title. That's it on an agreement for sale. Whereas on a rent to own, you have a tenant buyer and they have the option to buy at the end of the contract. It is not a must buy at the end of the contract.
Yeah, just so everybody understands the implications again, is the rent to own has been around for a long time. It's not new. But what is new is the fact that it's obvious now to me that there are rent to own buyers, in other words, tenant buyers, who can afford to pay more than market rate. A, because as Denise has clarified, it's an option to buy 3 years from now. They don't have to. B, it's a fixed price 3 years from now. And C, the new part, I think, Denise and Stuart, is that we are animating these buildings sooner rather than later. And I'll give you another example. Out in BC, I have a rent-to-own professional that I coach. And he came to the rescue of another client of mine who fell on hard times. And the reason that she fell on hard times is that she had a super huge receivable, but the person who owed her the money went bankrupt. And she was out $330,000. So her credit score went to heck in a handbasket, went down considerably, and she could not renew her mortgage, and she was going to get thrown out of her own house. So my colleague or my coaching client came along. He bought the house, he financed it, and they turned the detached garage into a workshop. And there was a 2-bedroom suite, which was rented in the back, a little self-contained suite. And then they did a micro suite. So all of a sudden, between the rent-to-own professional and the tenant buyer, which was this woman who was living in her own house, they had, I think they got $1,000 for the workshop. They got $2,000 for the 2-bedroom and another, I don't know, $1,500 for the micro suite. So they had, she had, and the rent-to-own professional had an extra $4,000 a month in income, independent. And how you split that, Denise, between the rent-to-own professional, the tenant buyer, now and in the future, that's a debate and a discussion and a negotiation you have. But the fact is, it de-risks the process for everybody. Sorry, Denise, I cut you off.
No, what I was going to say is all of this animation will help determine what the price is at the end, and the price at the end must be determined up front.
That's right.
So that it works out, because there's a certain percentage that you have to calculate in there that they're going to pay for that option, that option to buy later. But back in 2010, Vancouver was very, very familiar with this because they couldn't afford homes. So that's what they were doing. The tenant buyers were buying places where the garage was already changed into a secondary suite or a coach house or whatever. So even back in 2010, that was happening back then.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my speech. And then afterwards, my jaw dropped as Elizabeth did her thing. Now, everybody, I did put into the chat box Elizabeth's contact information. As I said, in terms of if you want to do a rent to own, if you want to get involved in the industry, in my opinion, there's no better place to start than to reach out to Elizabeth, either for some coaching or advice or both. Okay. So Aaron, I lived up to my word. It was not longer than 20 minutes. Over to you.
Can you let me share my screen?
Absolutely. Make co-host. Yes, there you go.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, all. So I would like to touch on the slides that I was going to go through last week, but Bruce and David kind of stole my thunder. What I want to do is kind of continue down the road of what we started with and how to run projects. And I know a lot of you will probably run some of your own projects. So I wanted to kind of share the things that I've picked up on over 25 years on how to find great sub trades and how to find and source out your own materials and start to get towards like getting everyone towards that $200 or $250 a square foot price. We'll do that. We'll also take some time and share how I do my partnership agreements, which makes sense because Brad is a partner and he'll be on a little bit after. And I want to share a few things on that I think will be interesting. So the sub stuff we'll start with is, the hardest part is finding them and then keeping them, and then really how we communicate. And we're going to blast through some material stuff and then a special that Bruce has kind of asked me to include. And we'll get to that quickly. I know I don't have tons of time, so I will get through it as quick as I can. Finding great subcontractors is the key to every development that you will take on. They're really hard to find because the good ones are always busy. I will say, though, as part of the downturn in today's economy in the construction industry, you have an amazing, amazing opportunity to find subcontractors. And that is get up early in the morning, go to a new construction site, and write down names and numbers of vans that are pulling it. In Ottawa and across the country, we have slowed down our new construction by about 30%. So those guys that have been running high off the hog for the last 3 years, adding to their crew, rocking out, getting a lot of stuff done, now are sitting at about 40% of their capacity, and they are looking for work. You will never have a better time to find super great subs than going to a construction site at 6 in the morning and just taking pictures of vans. That's how I have found some of the best subs I have. And today for the next year, this is dynamite. It is a gold way to find new subs. I love referrals as well, but I did put a note in there that buyer beware. You do have to be careful. You still have to vet them out. And there's a model here that is interesting, where subcontractors will actually pay you for referrals. So you can actually make a little bit of money by taking some good subs and referring them to other colleagues, other investors, other friends. They're usually the standard fee on that sort of stuff is about $2,500. So I would tend to try and grow your subcontractor base. And when people are looking, refer them. You can make a little bit of money on that as well. So the other spot where I go and find a lot of my subs, I go to my suppliers. There's your suppliers, if you have some, will tell you who the best sub trades they are, and they're going to know based on a couple of things: how polite they are, how often they show up, if they're paying for their orders, and the kind of referrals and stuff that are coming back, because your suppliers also know about all the callbacks. So they're going to be able to tell you if people are good or junky, and I get a lot of people from there. I'll tell you where I get the worst subs. I've tried Kijiji and Facebook on 3 separate occasions. It is the worst, absolute worst thing I have ever done. I will never, ever do it again. You end up with people on these sites that are looking. I've been scammed one time, and I've had just awful experiences. So I would really highly encourage you to never go on those sites. The other spot that I've been really leery of doing before is guys that show up on my different job sites promising that they've done a lot of things. I've gone down this path through desperation a couple times, and it tends to not work very well either. People that are actively looking for a lot of work, especially 6 months ago, probably aren't that good, and there's a reason they're looking. One of the things, and we talked a little bit a couple weeks ago about Gantt charts and communication and Microsoft Project. One of the things I wanted to mention about subcontractors is you have to understand why and I'll include myself in this. I do have I went to university 3 times. I never finished. I had a pretty good time, to be honest. But why a lot of people end up in the trades is because they don't like computers. They are not very computer literate. Some of my best subcontractors, and I met with Denise and Stuart yesterday for a little while, and I told them this story. I've been dealing with my drywall guy. He's in his 70s. He cannot read and write. He does the best drywall work I have ever seen in my life. But when it comes down to the business side of it, he cannot do it. I really need to stress that when we go into some of these Gantt charts and different ways to communicate with subs, simplicity will always be the key.
Aaron,
yes.
can I show everybody something? I don't know if you guys could see this. I'll just go to the full screen here. I don't know if you guys could see this. This is not even in ink, you guys. This is a bill from one of my contractors in pencil. Yeah, it's in pencil. All right, and it's got a bunch of receipts attached to it. This is one of the contractors, Aaron, I've been working with for 25 years. And the level of trust between us is such that this is a perfectly fine invoice. And as you've said many times to me and the rest of the students here, you know, paying people on time is very important, which we do usually within a couple of days. And you know, he's never owned a house. He keeps things very simple. Until recently, he didn't even have a bank account.
Yep.
Right. So, and the trust is so great that I could say to him, look, I need, I want a little cabin over here. Go build me a cabin over there. One of my daughters needed, you know, a tiny house. He just went and built it, and he bills me every 2 weeks. Actually, I think every week, every Friday. And so trust is very important. And many of them, you know, it's only recently that he's learned how to text. You can't email this guy, and his knowledge of computers would be, other than his smartphone, would be zero.
Yeah, it's shocking, and that's not. I wouldn't say it's
but the
cool,
quality,
but that's a lot of people.
The quality of the work, the attention to detail, the care, and you know, if something bad happens in the middle of the night, I can call Patrick O'Connor, and he'll at 3 o'clock in the morning he'll get up and fix something that's urgent.
Love it. I know.
All right, you okay? You can share again. I cut you out there. Sorry.
No problem. Okay. I just touched on this, but the communication part is really important. They're not that literate. I want to tell a little bit of a story. So about 12 years ago, I redid a big part of the roof for the Supreme Court of Canada. The roofing company that I hired, I don't want to say their name, but they're the second largest commercial roofing company in Ontario. No, probably Eastern Ontario, sorry. And when we did all the work there, we needed to have super level or super clearance, security clearance there. They had, of a crew of 120 people, they had 2 people that could pass the security clearance to do the work there. It's amazing to me that so many companies end up employing people that are troubled. Most roofers, as a rule, are in the prison system. And I hate to clarify that and say it quite like that, but most of them, people don't want to be on a roof to do this work. So it's pretty interesting what's happening out in the trades there. So one of the best ways that I communicate with my subs, I'm a real keep it simple, stupid guy. I use whiteboards. So if you go to any of my offices, of which I have 4 in different parts of town, I have whiteboards in all of my offices. I keep a main board in each site trailer, and then I have smaller boards that I put in each unit of the rentals or of the units that are being built and worked on. It's a really easy way to communicate with your different subs and sub trades when maybe you can't be there. I use a color-coded system. So red is that kind of critical, please look at me now. Yellow is, you know what, think about it. And then the green is more of that kind of casual reminder. For the people that aren't there every week, I take a picture of it and I send it off to the subcontractor. I send it to the site foreman and the owner of the business. That way we're all in the same kind of loop. And then I have myself and my staff, we walk through every day and we just continually update the board. And most of my subs are in the habit of going through and putting a check mark next to things that are done. And I always ask them to initial it, so I know who looked after it and what they did. The other thing that you have to do when you're doing multifamily homes, just label the units. I don't care if I do A, B, C, D, E, and F. You put a little tag in there, because so many times you'll ask someone to do work on a unit and they'll go to the wrong unit and do the wrong thing. But a simple labeling system works every time. This is the Supreme Court building. Like I said, just unbelievable to me that of a huge crew, I was only able to get 2 people. So this job took like 6 months to finish, to be able to schedule it all. And the weird thing about the Supreme Court is when they're sitting, For any sort of hearings, no one is allowed to work, but they don't tell you when they're sealing until the day of. So this job was a nightmare. I'll never work there again. Now that you have them and you found your subs, what do you do to keep them? I keep talking about this. Meet their terms, beat them if you can. You will unfortunately buy loyalty, but that's what it'll take while you're building out that relationship. Early payments, people absolutely love that because in this industry, they're always late. So if you can do anything to improve on that, even if the other thing you can do is give partial payments. Listen, I can't pay you the whole thing now, but I want to get you some money early into the relationship today. I put in there, support them on site, even simple cleanups, showing up early, moving material for them, things like that. They go a long way. When you set up your arrangement with your subs, you're typically dealing with the owner of the company. He's not the guy with the boots on the ground a lot of times. So you really want to ingratiate yourself and familiarize yourself with the people that are going to be there, ideally making your project amazing. And doing those little things, they go a long way because most people just don't. And a lot of times you see owners of buildings, they treat these people like garbage, and they're not, and they really deserve as much respect as you would want to get from them. And that part is so critical. I mentioned communication again, that simple messaging that is consistent. So they always know what to look for. They know how you work and how you think, and then they start to think the same way. And then you kind of have this amazing mind meld. I did, and we've talked about it a couple times, but when I talk about future opportunities with some of the sub trades, I don't just throw out addresses. I will sometimes take them there. I will often put together a little slide deck, a little presentation that shows them the upcoming opportunities and why you want to continue to do business with me, not just on this building, but in the foreseeable future, the stuff that's secured. And the other thing that people really love is give them final crack at pricing. You will go out, you should go out and get 2 to 3 quotes. Some people get 5. But what your really good subs deserve is the opportunity to take a final shot. They'll really appreciate that, and they'll typically beat the lowest price, and you'll end up with a better price and work with the team that you want to work with. A couple of miscellaneous things that kind of bounce around in my head. Collusion is a very real thing in our industry. It's a scary thing. You want to watch out for it. There's a lot of people that are very cognizant of the industry as a whole, where the pricing sits, and a lot of these guys talk together. I worked commercial, electrical, and mechanical, and I can tell you firsthand, I would never name names, but I know price fixing is a very real thing in the commercial industry, and it is slowly starting to move into the residential side. So it's something to really watch out for. You get a lot of, especially 6 months ago, that I'm too busy price, which is coming out, 30 or 40% above what it should be. And it's kind of like a throw out price. They don't want to do the work. They're just throwing out a huge price. So if they get it, they're going to make a lot of money. And I put in there small print. To Bruce's point, be very cognizant when you get quotes from subs that you're comparing apples to apples. Oftentimes, people are very tricky. They'll leave things out of their quotes that you don't pay attention to. There is no centralized bidding platform that exists on the residential side. So you'll get like 1-page quotes. I've gotten quotes that are text messages saying, I'll do this for $25,000. I have no clue what that $25,000 represents. And my response is, great, that sounds good. Send me exactly what that represents, because I can't say yes until I know what I'm saying yes to. I do have a few friends, and it may be a model that I move towards as well, where they'll actually lay out the entire pricing proposal that they'd like to look for. So when they, instead of just sending, go ahead, Bruce.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Aaron. I wanted you to finish your thought there, but now that I've cut you off, I'll intrude, and I apologize again. So one of the things, I'm not sure if you've covered it, but maybe you haven't, and you could comment on it. One of the things where you have contractors, like I mentioned, Pat O'Connor a few minutes ago, where there's a level of trust. Some of the things that maybe you want built, you can do on a time and materials basis, and which is basically what this is, right? Mm-hmm. So what I mean by that, guys, is it may be cheaper in some cases if you trust the contractor, where he or she, they're going to bill you every week or every 2 weeks for their time, at a certain rate. If they're charging $45 an hour or $65 an hour or whatever it is, They tell you how many hours they put in and what materials they bought. They don't mark up usually the materials. Maybe they should, but they don't. And they just give you the labor rate. Because one of the things I found, Aaron, is for some of the more difficult projects that I've tackled, if I ask for a fixed price, on a contract, it is so difficult to know where prices for lumber are going to be and prices for brick and trusses and everything else, that if there is a high level of trust, you could go on a time and materials basis. I'm not sure if it's a good idea, but certainly I've done that on a number of in a number of cases.
Yeah, and so I haven't provided a fixed price in 3 or 4 years. I only work on time and material. And at the very end of this course, if you give me the time, I'll actually share with people exactly how I price out all my stuff. So I want to jump into labor rates, because when you do time and material stuff, on the certified trades, your plumbers, your electricals, your HVACs, you got to be really careful. Typically, they'll charge you mechanic rates, but there'll only ever be one mechanic and like 3 apprentices on site. It's a really easy way for them to make money, and a lot of times there'll be co-op students and a mechanic on site, and they're double dipping. Union versus non-union. I ran a union shop, so I'm pretty familiar with the rules. There are certain advantages. You have certified tradespeople. They tend to be larger companies, and the price modeling is much easier to forecast because the rates are everywhere. If you want to know what they're being paid, you can look them up and you'll know exactly what they're being paid. Non-unionized, cheaper, less regulated. Most residential contractors are running with non-unionized, but the move is moving a lot more towards the union there. Material sourcing, I made a bunch of notes. If you don't have a Home Depot commercial account, go out today and set one up. I'll tell you why. They do $20 delivery, doesn't matter where you are. You get up to 5% cash back on every purchase you use, an additional 1% if you have a Home Depot card. Last year, I had almost $20,000 in gift cards, and I'll say that again, it's gift cards, it's tax-free benefit. That gift card, I can do whatever I want with it. I can give it to my guys, I can use it for my house. No one ever knows I even received it. $20,000 is a lot of money. I spent a lot of money to get it, but that's okay. They have a dedicated account team. Anything you see in a Home Depot that has a yellow tag on it is negotiable. So it can be a garage door, it can be windows, it can be drills. That is a negotiable item. You go to the pro desk and you ask for an additional discount. In addition to Home Depot, go to your 2 local lumber yards. Almost in every small town in Ontario, there's at least 2. Make sure you go in person, ask for the manager. Bring your little presentation, talk to them about what you're doing, bring some plans. They're super old school. They have a lot more flexibility on pricing and how they treat you. Take an application, fill it out, and give it to them while you are there. Do not send it by email. It will get lost. And as the last note, I only pay with credit card on everything. I do not have cash accounts anywhere. Credit card equals points, points equals trips, points for me equals a tax-free benefit, right? This is a slide here. I've negotiated some pricing with Home Depot. I only buy my wood by the lift now. So what I've done is I'm the only one that I know of that has this in the country. And I've been able to negotiate this directly with the Home Depot management team. By buying by the lift, they come shipped direct from the factory. They're wrapped and they're dry. No one's picked through the wood, and I save a ton of money. And it's something I can either pass on, and in a lot of cases, I actually sell lumber. I've kind of become like a middleman, and I actually end up selling some lumber to some of my friends because I get it for a better price.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's really fantastic actually. But it's taken 5 years, and I built the Home Depot manager's bathroom, so for very cheap. So, but anyhow, that's a different story. I would always try, if you're going to general your building, to supply your own materials. It makes a big difference. Make sure this item is dialed in prior to engaging your subcontractors, because they won't love it. Make sure you have some examples with you of where you get it, why you do it. Kind of share that with them so they can understand the pricing and stuff. You end up being able to control your quality and the availability of products, and you're on the hook for how you order them. Make sure the subs know that you're responsible if there's issues with delivery, because that'll be one of the big kind of kickbacks from your subcontractors. If you can find subs that allow you to do it, it becomes all about relationship, because you have to understand that as a subcontractor, your material markup represents your buffer. there really is not a lot of money in labor, but that material markup sometimes is anywhere from 15 to 40, 50, 60%. And that extra money is what kind of keeps them sane. That's when I would talk about time and material. They will love that model because there's no risk to them. You de-risk the entire project for them. They don't have to spend time quoting it, and they know they're going to be set to make a certain amount of money on each hour of the time they're there, and a certain amount of money on material markup if they can get it. These are kind of the big kind of thought items that come to me. If you're building rentals, like forget about custom building. Do not become rigid on material selections and colors. If you are, you will slow down your projects. I would counter to most people, and I've had this conversation, that when you're building a rental or a multifamily, colors don't matter that much. You will never live in this house. Do not think of it as a home. Think of it as a business. If you do that, you can go to suppliers. You can buy lot items. Last year I bought probably $80,000 of siding for $5,000 because I took it off their hands. It's a bunch of miscellaneous colors, to be fair, but I've built with that like 7 times. We did 2 sheds at my house, and it cost me almost nothing. The second byproduct is I actually did them a favor by getting it out and clearing it out of their warehouse. I look for opportunities at every step of the process. They always, even your suppliers and your subcontractors, always have stuff that they're looking to get rid of. Like every single one of them do. We are all hoarders in this industry. So if you talk to them and you're willing to take stuff off their hands, you're talking about like 50 cents, 40 cents on the dollar, and it's all negotiable.
We have a
Yes.
Aaron, this is Ida. I have a question. I just want to know, like, where do you store all the materials that you buy? Like, we don't have storage, right?
Yeah, so I'm particularly lucky that I have a lot of storage. I own a lot of land, so it's a little bit easier for me. The couple of sites that I'm building are double lots. So well, Denise and Stuart, we walked through one of them where I'm building a 6-plex. I own the building next to it. I kick the tenants out and I turn that into my storage yard. But in some of this stuff with your suppliers, if you're going to buy a big lot good, they'll hold it for you because it's sitting there anyway. All that stuff is negotiable. I would be very keen to talk to your suppliers about how that works.
One other thing I would add, Ida, to that, I like what Aaron just said, his solution, which is, you buy it from them, but they store it on their lot, which I think is clever. But the other thing is that there are more and more contractor yards springing up all across the States and Canada. And, for example, one of my coaching clients runs a company called Long Yards on Bank Street. And you can get like a 50-foot by 50-foot, contractor yard where you can store material. And I don't think it's very expensive. I don't know, it's something like $350 or $400 a month for a yard where you have, it's screened in, it's fenced in. Yeah, there's video cameras everywhere. There's a passcode protected gate. So there are storage opportunities. Or if you have a property and you have a backyard, you could build a small workshop in the backyard. I'm keen on that. So you might, or you have a detached garage that's empty, you can store materials there. So there's lots of alternatives. I've got 2 other questions for you, Aaron. One,
Yep.
do you ever get a volume discount from a sub or from a supplier?
Yes, all the time.
So
All the time.
like if I was a hairdresser and I bought lots of L'Oreal products over the year, sometimes some of my clients who are hairdressers and other people in that kind of industry, they might get a check from L'Oreal for $10,000 or $15,000 at the end of the year because they bought so much stuff. And I was wondering if you ever get that from your subs or from your suppliers.
So on the supplier side, there's 2 things. Almost every supplier will have a kickback program. So they'll kick back money to you at the end of the year. And the second thing is they all have volume purchasing programs. So when I buy wire, I buy a pallet of wire. It saves me 20% on the wire. And let me tell you, you use more wire than you think, and it can go on. Wire is universal. It doesn't matter what building you're doing, 14-2 wire, it goes into all of it. They all have some version of those 2 programs in place.
The other question I had for you is this. We've talked about this before in the Buildup class, and of course, elsewhere. The people who have real money in our industry tend to be the subs and the trades. You know, every subcontractor, every plumbing subcontractor I've ever known ends up being wealthy, right? And they love real estate. So if you're doing a new project, and you're looking for investor money, have you ever asked some of your suppliers, some of your contractors, some of your trades and sub-trades to, sort of throw some money into the pot as well?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and actually I've been approached more by them than I've ever had to ask them. It's
Cool.
worked the other way for me. And I want to take one step back in terms of where to store materials. Your sub trades all have large yards. The delivery on most of these big items is free. Have the windows delivered to their yard. They'll charge you a few points, but it doesn't even count. Whatever they're charging you is nothing. That's an amazing spot to do it. The other spot where you can look for storage opportunities, go to people that have farms. They all have land, and they'll happily take your stuff. They won't even charge you very much for it. I have different projects and different things sitting on different properties. They're charging me like $50 a month. I could show up with a case of beer and I would be good with most of these things. So I will jump into the other thing that I want to talk to that's really important when you look at materials. You have the cost of the material, but you also have a cost to install that material. You always have to look at the delta. Some things are cheaper to buy, but harder to put in. And it's really important to have discussions with subcontractors. They will tell you what they like to work with and what products are going to cause them time and money. Once you figure out that delta, you can make really informed decisions. A perfect example is everyone wants black windows and doors. Black windows and doors cost almost 15% more, and they take 1 to 3 weeks longer. You go into customized siding, everything costs more. It takes longer to get it in. Those things have to be thought through before you go into the project, so you know when to order them and know how much they're actually truly going to cost you, because it's not just the cost of the material. It is often the cost to put it in. This part, Bruce had kind of asked me if I'd be willing to open up one of the things that I do through my coaching business. And I thought, well, this is kind of a great thing to do, and it makes sense to me. So this is kind of Bruce's request, and I've kind of put this in. I've been buying stuff for a long time. I have some of the best discounts in all of Ottawa. I have signed exclusive supplier agreements with about 12 suppliers, where I know for an absolute fact you will not get a better price than I have, or you won't get better service than I have. One of the things that's really been beneficial is by adding all these different businesses, I'm able to offer a lot of locations where people can put up their signs, and you show up at my job site and you know that all the windows and doors are supplied by Gentex. So there's a nice add-in from them. They actually pay for the signs too, which is a nice add-in for me. And Bruce kind of asked if I would extend my discount model to the clients of the course for a period of 6 months. I'm great with that. I'm actually going to say it's going to be a period of 12 months. I think a year is twice as good. Normally I charge $600 a month a fee to access these discounts, but everyone that's on this course, there won't be any charge to access them. It'll just be it'll be free to everyone for that. I have over 400 suppliers in the database. I tend to have about 15 or 20 that I use on a really regular rate. My discounts vary from 25 to 93%. I actually buy most of my plumbing from my plumbers. And I mentioned to Denise and Stuart yesterday, I buy siding for 3 different siding companies because my pricing is better than they can get, and they've been doing it 20 years. My best opportunities lie at these next ones. Boone Plumbing, my discount, that's where I get 93% on plumbing fixtures. Gentech windows and doors and siding, I'm up to 60% there. Olympia Tiles, I know the general manager. He used to be my rep 20 years ago, so I have the same pricing that Minto has. I have a 40% discount at Olympia Tiles. Dakin, the general manager, and is a friend of mine. We have dinner on a regular basis. Normally, you're not allowed to buy refrigeration equipment unless you're licensed. I'm not. They've made a special dispensation for me. I have an amazing discount with Home Depot, the Fireplace Center, and really all I do, and this is how I work my time and material business as well, I give everyone true cost and I mark it up 15%. So if it's something that interests people, I'll send out a link probably next week with how the program runs. And again, there's no cost. Do it, don't do it. It actually kind of doesn't really change my life too much. And then everything on subcontractors, I provide the links to subs. I don't want any money. I just want to make sure that the relationship moves forward, and I pass that off as with a no markup applied. And then any of the companies that I own that you want things from, I discount that all by 10% as well. Okay, that's an example of what I paid for the sixplex we built. The list price is somewhere like 87,000. I can't really see it on my screen, but I think I got it for about 60% off on all the windows and doors there. So I think I'm getting close to running out of time, so I'll jump past this. Going to open a different slide.
That was really good, Aaron. Keep going. I know we got Brad waiting in the wings, though. We don't want to leave him a short.
No, I'll be able to do this one really fast. So I just wanted to go through and talk about how I think about partnerships, what I do and don't like about them.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
That would be great. I think it's really important. So Aaron's going to talk about partnerships, and Denise and Stuart, you guys could give at least an hour-long, lecture on partnerships and what to watch for and what to look for. So you guys have probably all heard this joke. There's still two chairs in heaven waiting for the first two partners to get there and like each other. So taking on a partner is almost like getting married. You want to marry somebody you love, you like, and you trust. But you also want to marry a partner, and if you do, you want to make sure that you like and trust them and that they like and trust you. Even having said that, Aaron, one of the things I preach is that if you're going into a partnership, you should always be thinking about the non-partnership partnership model. And what I mean by that, everybody says, what the hell is a partnership, non-partnership partnership? And what I mean by that is, for example, let's say, Aaron, you and I were going to build, I don't know, 6 duplexes. A non-partnership partnership might mean that we're 50-50 partners while we develop 6 duplexes. But at some point in time, 5 years from now, or maybe even a decade from now, we would sit down and we would say, okay, Aaron, you're going to keep 3 of them 100%. I'm going to keep 3 of them 100%. And we would split up. So we would actually discuss that going in, that there would be an exit. And therefore, if Aaron ends up owning 3 duplexes, 100% his, and I end up owning 3 of my own, if Aaron wants to sell and run off to Costa Rica, you've heard me say that before, he can do that. If I want to leave those 3 duplexes to my kids or grandkids, I can do that, right? Because everybody's priorities will shift, their paths will diverge. And so if you have this discussion when you're going into a partnership, whether it's 50-50 or 1/3, 2/3, whatever, you should have that discussion.
Yes. So I will, these are the do's I do, and I have a lot of partnerships, so I thought about this a lot.
You're still, Aaron, you're still showing the other screen with the supplier cost. So minimize that one and show the other one.
Roger that. Is that better?
Well, we can see your face, but we don't see your screen. So just share again, but share the other slide deck. Hi, Brad. Nice to see you. You'll be up soon.
No worries. I can wait.
All right.
That should be better.
Okay, now we're good. Rethink construction partnerships. Okay.
So, these are the notes I've made, and I'll go through these pretty quick because they're all on here. The due diligence, vet the partners. Everyone knows my beer theory. If you don't have a beer with them, don't become partners. It won't work. Other partners, colleagues, friends, I always talk to them, see how they like people. My kids do all the Google social media searches because I have no idea how to do that for people. Finances, just be open, honest, tell people where you stand, where you have. I'd love to look at other people's businesses, see how they run them. Really, really big one is understanding what their time and capacity is to go into this new endeavor. I always set up a meeting with their administrative team to understand how they run their books and how they run the back end of their business. Trust your gut, your first impression. Understand your position, lead from the front. When you set up these agreements, make sure you know your value adds and what you bring to the team. It'll make the negotiation much better. I always do this, and Brad will attest to this. You find partners with different skill sets. I can't see the benefit of having 2 construction guys form another construction company. We'll argue about everything. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't really understand when a bunch of real estate people all partner up as well. I'd rather see you partner up with people that can run the financial side or the marketing side, etc. The last thing, and this is non-negotiable for me, before I sign any agreement, I have dinner with their spouses. I'd like to sit down break bread as a family and make sure that we all get along. Don't lie, don't exaggerate your position, don't leave any stone left unturned in your partnership search. Please don't be afraid to ask all the tough questions. Do not talk yourself into bad situations. I think that's happened to all of us on this call. Don't make desperate decisions. There's always another way. People like Bruce, there's a lot of people that can guide you out of really bad positions. And again, don't have the same talents and skills as your potential partner. Bring something else to the table. Things to consider, and again, I've kind of had a couple of situations where I've had to sue to get out of bad agreements, so I do have a little bit of thought on this. I would look at your agreement, consider the shotgun clause, look at how you're going to handle divorce and death. These become really big issues. They're only an issue when they become an issue. Look at your share structure, talk about percentages, understand all that up front. Make sure, and I talked to Dennis and Stuart about this, payment. If you need to be paid as a partner, what is your time worth? What is your partner's time worth? Do this at the beginning of the agreement, because halfway through or 2 years into it, man, it's hard to have these conversations. Figure out where all the money is coming from in your agreement. And I have a kind of an interesting thought, but look at what your payback requirements are, that 3, 6, 12, and 18. Work on a business plan and an action plan together, and make sure you both have really solid independent legal and accounting teams. What I do with partnership opportunities, and I know I'm getting close to time here, Brad, I'll wrap this up quickly. I want to make sure that I make a presentation and that things that are brought to me excite me and there's something new. I know what I don't do well, and I try and always find people around me that can improve that. I have a fairly large philosophy. Every time I have opened a new business, the philosophy is simple. I don't need it to make me money for the first year. And when I do that, I know that I can make the right decisions, and I'm not being fiscally driven into rushing things, shortcutting things. It really matters to me. I know what my value adds are. I know what I bring to the table. Time is a really big one. These things take a lot of time, and the last note I put on there is shake hands. It's a lost art, but it matters. Look someone in the eye and shake their hand. Real quick case study. This is how we opened our excavation business. I just wanted to share how we did that. The small backstory, I was doing an insurance partner for my new project for my partner. His house collapsed during that big derecho storm. I met him by happenstance. He mentioned to me one day that his dream was to open his own excavation company. He had all the money put aside, and then his foundation collapsed, and he didn't. He took half of that money and put it into his foundation because it wasn't covered by insurance. So the next day I made him an offer, and I told him I would flip the bulk of the backhoe and I would cover half of it. It was a very easy discussion. We became 50-50 partners. I took my 50%, and I called Brad, who's on this call, and I offered him a percentage right off the bat, and I offered a percentage to my head of administration. Way I look at these partnerships is 50% of nothing is nothing, but if I bring in great people on my side, it will accelerate the growth of this business. It matters not to me that I've given up 20%, because I know with great people all pushing together, all with a mutual goal, we have a much better chance of becoming an amazing company. And the way it works on the owner-operator side is Mark runs the day-to-day business. I just kind of sit in the background. We've helped on website. We've helped on administrative. I take care of all of it, all the billing, and we provide all the financing and the moral support. So we opened the doors a month ago, and we have $300,000 in equipment already. We have a backhoe, a Mini X, 2 tractors, 2 trailers. Can't even remember what else, but. And then the reasons that this model works, again, contractors hate paperwork. We handle it all as an administrative team. I have a team of 1 full-time, 2 part-time, and we're looking for another full-time. We do all the corporate info, all the startup information, the websites. It allows Mark and his team to focus on his strength, which is running equipment. Again, I don't need to make money off this enterprise for the first year and a half. You get rid of that money stuff. Your focus is on reinvesting and producing the best business you can make. And the vertical integration, which is Brad's term, I know everyone loves it, but you look for holes in your business offerings, and why not fill them internally? Why not just come up with a company to do that? We just signed the deals on opening a siding company, which we'll do the exact same thing with. So I think that's it for me, Brad. I did that as fast as I could. I will hand it over to you.
Just before we let Brad loose, a couple of comments on what you said. If you're going to do a 50-50 partnership, any of you guys, you should have a discussion about who has final decision making. You should not set yourself up for a stalemate. So typically, if I did a 50-50 partnership, because I'm such a bossy person, I would say to my friend and partner, I'm going to be the final decision maker. And we're going to have a voting trust. In other words, I get to vote your shares, maybe for the first 5 years of the business. So if there's ever an impasse, there's no question about how to break that. And if he or she, my business partner, says, no, I don't like that idea, that's fine. Then they're not going to be partners with me. The thing that kills projects, companies, is these incredibly long stalemates that go on between partners. If you have 4 partners, all 25% owners, there'll be shifting alliances and cliques. It's like Survivor, right? It becomes horrible. So if you have a voting trust where you perhaps get to vote everybody else's shares for the first 5 years of a business, so that there's no question that decisions can be made in a timely manner. And if there's an impasse, that's how you break it. So if you don't do that, what you'll find is that many of your projects will become orphans. You'll say, damn it, I'm doing all the work. I'm putting up more than half of the money, and my partner's not doing anything, and he or she is benefiting. And so you say, to hell with it, I'm going to stop working. I'm going to stop funding it. And the other partner says the same thing. So now nobody is looking after the project. That is a disaster. So don't do that. The last thing I would say is, Aaron, I would advise against shotgun clauses. For those of you who don't know what a shotgun clause is, it basically says, if I'm not happy with Aaron as my partner, which I'm sure would never be the case, but if I wasn't happy with him, I could say, Aaron, I'm willing to sell you my shares at, $100,000, or I'll buy your shares at $100,000. The problem with a shotgun clause, everybody, is that if you have one partner has more money than the other partner, that partner will wait until you, if you're the partner with the least amount of money, is the weakest that you can be. And then they will unleash the shotgun clause. So instead of offering 100,000 for my shares, or 100,000 for Aaron's shares, Aaron, who's the rich dude in this case, might say, well, Bruce, I'll buy your shares for 50,000, or you can buy mine, knowing that I don't have 50 grand. Right to them. So you have to be careful. So what I do instead, Aaron, is I simply put in first option.
Mm-hmm.
That means is, let's say Aaron and I were having some difficulty getting along. I would go to Aaron and say, look, Aaron, I'm thinking about selling my shares. Would you like to buy them for $100,000? Aaron says, no, not really. But then I have the right for the next 90 days to go out and sell them to whoever I want, as long as I don't sell them for less than 100,000. I can sell them to anybody in the next 90 days I want. And that works much, much better because it doesn't put either side in a corner. And after the 90 days, if I haven't sold it, then it repeats. Or if in that 90-day period, Aaron, somebody offers me, say, 75,000, then which is less than the 100,000, I have to go back to you in that circumstance and say, Aaron, actually, I have an offer, but it wasn't at 100,000 or more than 100. It's at 75. Do you want to buy at 75? Right? And maybe you'll then exercise it. But it's a first option, not a shotgun. And I think it works better. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Brad. I did talk, Brad, before we, and you are the co-host, so you can share your screen. I did introduce Brad, he wasn't on the call, but I said all kinds of nice things about you, Brad. I talked about the fact that you're an Airbnb or short-term rental expert with Hostfully, based in Texas. I talked about some of the development work that you've done. I've told everybody to subscribe to briefcase.email. It's fantastic, weekly free newsletter. I said you have 4 kids. I don't know if I forgot something. I mean, you're involved in so many things, and we're really glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You want me to share my screen and do the slides?
Yeah, I did update your slides. I don't know if you have the most recent slide deck. It's
Yep.
17 megabytes instead of 3. It's the big one.
All right. Can you see this?
Perfectly.
Yes.
How do I present?
Yeah, you could make it full screen.
Yeah. Oh, where's the present? There we go.
Oh, perfect. That's even better.
All right. Well, thanks for the intro, Bruce. Thanks for having me. I love talking about this stuff. I'm going to try to keep it to about 15 minutes because I'd rather answer questions than sit here and blabber on. I have quite a contrarian view on the current real estate market, and I'm going to talk you all through that and why I think it is going to be a boom time for smart investors over the next couple of years. So quickly on me, Bruce already mentioned a bunch in this. I write a weekly newsletter on all things real estate, briefcase.email. That's my passion. Writing is my passion. I write for a couple other outlets as well, like Swift Lane, and I write the weekly Stessa newsletter. They were recently acquired by Roofstock. That email list is about 250,000 weekly readers. That's more news topical on the real estate industry as well. I've been investing in real estate since 2010. My quote unquote day job is I'm chief marketing officer for Hostfully and Fundmore, both in the prop tech space. I have a portfolio of over 100 real estate assets in the short-term rental space, medium-term rental, long-term rental, a little bit of commercial, but my focus is really on residential and short-term rentals. Co-own a eco park campground with Aaron. We're involved in the tiny homes, which you all are aware of, and I put the train station there. We're currently redeveloping an old train station. I think the headline is here. I like to do fun stuff, and it all has to do with real estate. And I'm going to talk later about my real estate development company, Blair Capital. All right, so boom times. Sometimes I feel like when I'm reading headlines, this is sort of the mentality that we have. You hear buzzwords out there like crash, debt crisis, inflation, rates are skyrocketing. Inflation isn't transitory, which they originally said it would be. Housing prices are at record highs, rents are at record highs, banks are collapsing. Just this week, another regional bank collapsed, and I think there's going to be more dominoes to fall. Supply can't keep up with demand. Some of these, I could have 100 headlines on here, but overall, the consensus and the quote unquote experts in the media is that it's bad times. We're heading towards a recession. I tend to take a different perspective. Over the last 5 years, we've had a savagely unhealthy housing market, in my opinion. And that was fueled by the pandemic and 0% interest rates. So I actually think that we're heading more towards a recalibration, a deceleration, a bit more equilibrium in the housing market versus the 20% year over year price increases that we've been seeing over the last 5 years, which hasn't been healthy. That being said, there is going to be a lot of pain, unfortunately. There's a lot of investors, many of whom I know, I'm sure you all know, some investors who bought at the top of the market with record low interest rates. Now, when those mortgages come up for renewal, we've seen prices decrease a little bit. So the valuations have come down, and now they're going to have to refinance at a higher interest rate. In some cases, debt costs have tripled. So there's going to be a lot of pain over the coming years as these assets come up for mortgage renewal. And that's why I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for smart investors. The headwinds for some will be tailwinds for others. It just depends on how you position yourself. And I know they've been talking a lot about that in this course specifically. So where I see the bright spots, the tailwinds for savvy investors over the next couple of years, unfortunately, we have an affordability crisis in North America. Homes, have gone up 60, 70% in the last 5 years in most cases. So people can't afford homes, and that's exacerbated by rising interest rates as well. Not only can they not afford it, but if they couldn't afford it when it was 2% interest rates, they certainly can't afford it when it's 6 or 7% interest rates. So how does that turn into a tailwind for smart real estate investors? It means there's going to be more rentals. That's, plain and simple, supply and demand. Again, interest rates going through the roof. It looks like we might be stabilizing over the next couple of years. The Bank of Canada paused the last 2 rate announcements, and the Fed is signaling that they will likely pause during the next one, but we'll wait and see for their August meeting. But again, that means there's going to be more demand for rentals because people just can't afford the mortgages. We're still at record high housing prices, even though they've come down, 10, 20%. They were up 60 or 70%. So, you just have to keep that in mind. The regulatory environment, I can talk about this for hours. I am extremely bullish on apartment development over the next couple of years because of the regulatory easing that is happening across North America. States across the US are implementing upzoning regulations where essentially, and Canada, the BC just did it, and I'm sure you're all familiar with Bill 23 here in Ontario, which essentially upzoned the entire province. So now by legal right on almost all lots, you can add up to 3 units without having to go through expensive rezoning and site planning and all that nonsense. So I think, this gentle densification wave that's happening across North America, I think for real estate investors, obviously will be a strong tailwind for us. If you have a single family rental, you can now add a basement apartment and a coach house on the back and not have to go rezone it. So you can look at your current portfolio and see how you can, densify it, given the Bill 23. Or as you acquire new properties, you can keep in mind that you are able to add these additional units. I spoke a little bit about high prices. That's an obvious one. Lack of supply is going to keep prices elevated indefinitely, in my opinion, even though they've come down a little bit. Builders aren't building enough, unfortunately. And, regulatory moves like Bill 23 attempts to spur that. But we're dramatically undersupplied here in Canada specifically. And part of the issue with that as well, and it's not a bad thing, this country is built on immigration, and I think it's great, but it's at a 50-year record high. We let in 1 million new folks into Canada, which is great, but where are they going to live? And the government, in their infinite wisdom, put on the foreign buyer purchase ban. So, harder to buy a home. So what are they going to do? They're going to rent. So that is putting upward pressure on demand for rentals. So again, a very strong tailwind for investors over the next couple of years. And
Brad,
I know,
Brad, can I ask you a question?
Yep.
This is an excellent presentation, but I think everybody has the same question. So your conclusions, I support them 100%, is that in Canada, probably the States too, but certainly in Canada, there will be a huge increase in rental demand. Got that. But on the flip side, in terms of buying, it means that, you and Aaron, I think, are almost finished a sixplex, right? In Rockland, right?
Yep.
And Denise and Stuart, I think they've already finished a fourplex in Rockland, a small town in Eastern Ontario. And so fourplexes, sixplexes, 10plexes, the demand for those from investors will be so high that maybe on the buying side, the opportunities in the next 2 years might not be what we thought it was going to be.
Right. And that's why and every investor's strategy is different. My strategy specifically is the acquire underutilized land and build. So to build it ourselves, control the costs, and we get that, we get that nice bump in valuation because valuations are high, because rents are high, so your NOIs are high. But we build, Aaron's been talking about it this whole presentation. We have all these efficiencies. We've vertically integrated everything in the development life cycle and property management life cycle and acquisition life cycle. So I think if you can control those costs and you can build your own assets, I think that is the winning formula. And I think we're going to talk briefly about the sixplex after this.
Yeah, and just to emphasize for everybody what the direction that Brad and Aaron are going in, is that if you can't buy assets with a decent cap rate, if the prices are too high and the net operating income is too low, then that isn't a route to wealth. What Brad and Aaron are doing is they're finding existing property. Maybe it has an old building that's at the end of its economic life, but it has the right zoning in place. It's the right location. They knock down that building. They build a bunch of sixplexes or tenplexes, right? So if you can't buy it cheap enough and make sense of it, then you have to build it or you have to invent it. And that's basically what you've done, Brad.
Yeah. Yeah, so just to wrap up this slide, lending incentives, those are only increasing because of the affordability issues. I think David was on here talking about this MLI Select program from CMHC, so you're all very familiar with that. And all the overextended investors who are going to be underwater on their properties in the next couple of years because debt's coming up for renewal. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to scoop up some assets there. So yeah, we talked about this, my development company, Blair Capital Asset Management, we develop missing middle multifamily and secondary and tertiary markets. We have a very precise reasoning for that. We like smaller markets just because of acquisition cost is less, but demand is still high, especially for Class A rentals that we're building. I mentioned the vertical integration. I'll just breeze over it here. Acquisition, planning, and zoning. We do all that in-house. Same thing with the financing, investor relations, capital raising, construction, all the way to life cycle management of the property and selling it on the back end. And Bruce, I don't know how in depth you wanted me to get with the sixplex example. I know you added a bunch of slides here. I don't know if you want to ask me some questions or you want me to run through it. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm mute. So anyway, what I thought was really important, I think some of the people on the call have already seen this before, but this is what I call a sixplex, tenplex, gigaplex, and I don't want to go through all of that because, as I said, some of you have seen it before. But what it really amounts to is that Aaron and Brad have produced this at a very reasonable cost. I think everybody has heard this before, around $200 or $220 per square foot, as opposed to $300 or $400 or even $500 or $600 a square foot. So the costs are under control. I don't know if the timeline was, you were able to produce it in the time span that you originally thought, Aaron, but I think it was pretty close.
Longer, but due to some other challenges on a different project, like longer than it should have been.
All right. So if you don't mind, Brad, you could just talk about the floor plan, just to give people, again, an idea of how sixplex can become a tenplex.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll see the main level here, and I think everyone's familiar with the gigaplex idea, but just briefly, these are all 2-bedroom apartments, about 900 square foot each. The second bedroom has its own ingress and egress to the exterior. So you see that at the top here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but you can see there's a door right here to the exterior. So essentially, it's a 2-bedroom apartment, but it also capitalizes on someone who wants to have a home office, whether they're a lawyer, an accountant, they want to host a student in there and make a little extra money, or an Airbnb or something like that. So it's building on, and this was a concept that Bruce really helped us with even before the pandemic. We were planning on doing this, but the work from home trend obviously is here to stay and was put on rocket fuel because of the lockdowns. So this model fits in so well with that. We already have people who are asking to rent it out, even though we're not advertising it yet because we're only about 70% complete. Yeah, I don't know, Bruce, if you wanted me to.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, did the Canadian Public Service Union get the right to work from home in the latest contract? Or I know the government of Canada didn't want to include that right, but PSAC, the union, wanted it. Do you know if they actually got it, Brad?
I believe they did. I don't think they got exactly what they wanted, but I'm not super familiar. But there is a version of work from home that they got.
So what Brad is saying is now somebody could have a beautiful apartment, and they could have their office in an independent suite. If you had a small enterprise, like you had a nail bar or you're a hairdresser, you could have a little studio. So people don't have to come into your apartment to, visit a coach like me, or they don't have to come into your apartment if they're going to get their hair done or something like that. So on the second floor and on the ground floor, all of those units are gigaplex. In other words, they have those independent micro suites. But on the basement level, what you can see if you run your cursor on the basement level, those are just I think those are just 2-bedroom apartments, no independent micro suite.
Correct.
Yeah, we didn't have the space for to gigaplex those bottom units.
Alex, you put a comment in the chat box. They did not get the right. It's a case-by-case basis. Can you unmute yourself and just explain that?
Yeah, sorry. Hey, that's straight from my wife's voice. She told me she's a director at the government. So basically, that just does not exist. They do not have the right to work from home. You would have to make a case for yourself to work from home, and then be evaluated on the merit of that.
Yeah, do you know why the government was so resistant, Alex, to the work from home right? What was their concern?
I don't know. Do you know, Zoe?
Multitude of reasons as to why. A lot of it probably has to do with the fact that this is really setting a precedent. It's also the fact that hybrid is not necessarily something that is going to be you need to look at whether hybrid is here to stay or not. Right now it's just they were very reluctant to add the actual remote work to the collective agreement. However, everything is still ongoing on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, do you feel that if somebody got the right to work 2 days a week from their home office, that would make it difficult for a manager in the government to run his or her department?
That's a loaded question.
It is.
And it's highly dependent on the actual work of the employee and of the unit, and you will hear various responses, almost based also on the demographics, with the boomers very happy to go back to work and can't, with the Gen Xers feeling okay about it, with the millennials really pushing back, and with the Gen Z going, I don't understand. So it's a lot on the demographic side. Yeah,
I some years ago when former Prime Minister Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, he and some people may have heard me say this before, but he introduced a program, the 1-ton challenge, right? With Rick Mercer. Rick Mercer's a comedian, so they introduced the 1-ton challenge. And being a good Canadian, at least I hope so, I'm a good Canadian, I went on the 1-ton challenge website. I was probably the only person who ever actually went to the website. I went to the website and willing to take up the challenge of how to save 1 ton of CO2 a year. I went through the entire website and I could not find a single item other than one recommendation they had, which is when your children are brushing their teeth, turn off the hot water. Now that'll save a few micrograms of CO2. So you guys know what greenwashing is. That was greenwashing. So I invented, back then, this has got to be 15 years ago, I invented a real program to save 1 ton of carbon dioxide. It was very simple. If you could reduce the commute to work from, say, 20 kilometers or 30 kilometers to 5 kilometers. In other words, if you could move closer to work, you could save a ton of CO2. And if you operated a Jaguar, it might be 4 or 5 tons of CO2. So if you move closer to work, it makes sense. So, but the closest you could ever get to work is to have a home office, right? Your commute is from, like my office is, 2 floors away from my bedroom, right? So my commute to work is pretty low. So from an environmental point of view, I mean, the Trudeau government is, at least they talk about being green. I think by not allowing people to work from home, perhaps 2 days a week, they're actually going the wrong direction. But I don't know if you share that view.
They are allowing people to work from home. So hybrid agreements right now are actually in place. I think the fact that they don't want to put it into the legislation is just, that makes it just, that puts it on a whole different level, right? So I'm a hybrid employee. I run a team that is completely hybrid.
Wow.
and my entire branch is also hybrid. So it's very also dependent on the job that you do. It's dependent on how it can be achieved and whether you're client facing or not.
Yeah, and if I was, for example, if I was a cleaner for the government of Canada, you know, cleaning your office, you know, I obviously can't do that remotely. I have to be there, at least until we get some kind of robot that I can control. Brad, back to you now. So in terms of buying opportunities now, not rentals and not building, but in terms of buying opportunities, what would you be looking for in the next 2 years?
In terms of resale properties or development opportunities?
I'm talking not development opportunities, but you know, if you were going to buy a duplex, a triplex, a tenplex, if you were trying to, rather than build like you and Aaron do, if you were just trying to be an investor, maybe with some animation ideas, who knows what, but just trying to buy, what advice could you give people who are interested in building the real estate portfolio by purchasing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm extremely bullish on what is this Bill 23 is enabling, that gentle densification of up to 3 units on a property. So I would be looking for real estate that is not being used to its highest and best use, that you can add a coach house to the backyard, to you know, make a basement apartment in the basement, you know, those bungalows with big lots in the city.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'd be looking for over the next year or two.
In terms of buying, you know, like a tenplex or, you know, a multi-res building, that might be too competitive to get a decent price out of anybody.
Well, and that goes back to rents being at record highs. So NOIs are quite high. So, you know, it's hard for most investors to make some of that pencil, especially with debt costs. So I think that will be a challenge. But if you find something that's under a property that's underutilized, that is, you know, you can turn a 1 unit into a 3 unit. I think that's going to be the strategy.
That's really cool. And Paula is saying she's interested in hearing more about the land development option. So you know, we got another 2 or 3 minutes, Brad. Maybe we can get you out of here on this. In terms of land development options, one of the things that we've talked about, and we've already said on this call, is that let's see if you can find a building that's coming close to the end of its economic life, which has development opportunity and already has existing zoning in place, so you don't have to go through a 1 or 2 year process. Are there any other sort of hints that you could give Paula or anybody else on the land development side?
Yeah. So again, look for land that you can do in phases. So all the missing middle multifamily development we've been able to sever off the plot of land that we buy. So we build the first building such that we can sever off half of the land to build a second building on. So that 6plex we were talking about, there's a 5plex going in right next door to it after. We just bought land down the road as well that we're building an 8plex. And after we're done that, we're going to build an 8plex beside it. So look for land that you can, you know, do more than just one thing on. You know, why build just one if you can build 2? So that's kind of our model.
And I would underline what Brad said. Every time, at least in my experience, every time, you know, I've been able to draw a line on a piece of paper, and I think, Alex, you're doing something, you know, in terms of severance. Every time you can get a piece of property, maybe it has a little bit of extra property, and you can get a severance. It gives you all of those options that we talked about. You could build 2 buildings. You could have 2 phases. You could have 2 different financings. You could keep one and sell one, right? I mean, you just have so many more options. So I really like the approach that you're taking, Brad.
The other thing, real quick, Bruce, the other nice thing is when you have a building on site, you have a site office. So you have a bathroom, you have a microwave, you have a kitchen.
That's
you
right.
have a much better situation, and you answer the storage problem.
Yeah. And Alex, if you don't mind unmuting yourself one more time, I think you're actually thinking about doing a severance on one of the properties that you own. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what I did some investigation in terms of where the severance would have to be take place on the property itself, like what the minimum dimensions would be, and have a better idea. It does involve losing the building which is on there, unfortunately, one way, but so it becomes a little bit larger project. There's a bungalow on there, so that's why I'm investigating whether it's worth selling and moving it versus demolishing, and then everything becomes a very delicate time frame as well at that point.
Yeah, it's very complicated. And I did send to everybody, hope you all got it, you know, a short handbook I wrote over a period of time on moving buildings. And I really like that. Aaron, I think you've moved a few. I've moved a few. Alex, you're at least thinking about it. Denise, I know you've moved a few. And Denise and Stuart, you might also want to comment. Thank you, Alex. You might also want to comment just briefly as we wrap up. Your fourplex in Rockland could also be severed as of right, I think.
Yes, it can. It's called a part lot control that allows us to be able to sever without having to go back to the committee of adjustment.
That is so cool. I mean, I didn't even know that that was possible. You just draw a line, a piece of paper, register, you're done.
Yeah, it's actually a part lot control exemption bylaw. So
Right.
there is a bylaw that's required. So it's not quite as simple as getting your surveyor to draw a line on a map, but it's a whole lot cheaper than going through severance.
Fantastic. And Brad, Brad sent to Alex, don't demolish if you don't have to. Move it to a new vacant lot or sell it. I completely agree with that. All right, listen, everybody, we've got 2 weeks off, thank God. I want a full report from you, Aaron. And I don't know, Brad, are you going to Mexico with Aaron?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, so I expect a full report from you two guys. They're going to do perhaps a project, maybe 2 projects. Aaron, I think 1 in Cancun and 1 in Tulum, right?
Yeah, 20 acres in Cancun and 100 in Tulum. One more thing before we say goodbye.
Okay.
Brad and I own a bunch of companies together. We've never once argued about money, not once in 3 years. There is no place for greed in partnerships. If you get that vibe that your partner is greedy, it will not work. I'm talking, I don't know what it is in millions, but there's millions of dollars in play, and we have never argued one time.
That's well, you know, I can understand that. Brad is such a nice guy. How did you pick Aaron as a partner, Brad?
I'm a nice guy too.
I like having a beer with him, and I can't swing a hammer, and he can. So
Yeah, exactly. Listen, Brad, I know you're super. I mean, he's super busy. He's got that family obligations and everything else. Thank you all. I'll see everybody in 2 weeks. This will be recorded because we had about half the students couldn't make it today. They're just going to have to record it, but we'll see you in 2 weeks.
bye, everyone.
Great job.
Thanks, everybody.